And we are live with Carolina Poets. Welcome. Welcome to Carolina Poets Goes Live in this special edition. We are live streaming on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. This is a bi-monthly series hosted on the Carolina Poets Facebook page and YouTube channels the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. I'd like to thank my co-curator, Kimberly Sims Gibbs, who helps to host this series. For the Carolina Poets series, we've been fortunate enough to have a number of great readers, such as North Carolina Poet Laureate Jackie Shelton Green, Alabama Poet Laureate Ashley Jones, Charleston, South Carolina Poet Laureate Marcus Amaker, Tyree Day, Denise Duhamel, Jacinta White, and many, many others. If you've missed any of our past readings, you can go to the Carolina Poets Facebook page or check out our YouTube channel to see archived readings. For each reading, we feature 3 poets with connections to the Carolinas and beyond. We feature established poets and emerging voices. Before we get started, I'd like to stall just a minute and tell you what I'm reading. So I'm currently reading Second Story by Denise Duhamel. So really enjoying this collection. So check that out. Tonight, we're pleased to have 3 great poets joining us. We have Eric Nelson, Lenard Moore, and Kelli Allen. So please ask any questions you have for our poets in the chat below the broadcast, either on YouTube or Facebook. And we will have a short Q&A session at the end where we will bring all the poets back on and you can ask your questions. So up first tonight, we have the poet Eric Nelson. Eric has published 6 poetry collections, including Terrestrials, chosen by Maxine Kuhlman for the X.J. Kennedy Award, The Interpretation of Waking Life, winner of the University of Arkansas Poetry Award, and Some Wonder, which won the 2015 Gavall Press Award. His next book, Horse Not Zebra, will be published in 2022 by Terrapin Books. So hopefully he'll tell us more about that. His poems have appeared in a variety of journals and anthologies, including Poetry, The Sun, The Oxford American, A New Geography of Poets, Poetry Daily, and Verse Daily. He taught poetry, fiction, and literature courses at Georgia Southern University. He retired as Professor Emeritus in 2015 and moved to Asheville, North Carolina with his wife and slightly neurotic border collie. It's not an exaggeration. He teaches private poetry workshops and in the Great Smokies writing program at the University of North Carolina at Asheville. With that, I'd like to bring to the stage Mr. Eric Nelson. Eric, how are you?
I'm great, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the reading, excited to have a book coming out in a few months, Horse Not Zebra from Terrapin Books. And I'm going to be reading entirely from that book, Horse Not Zebra. And I'm going to jump right in, I think, with the title poem. It will explain and set up some more explanation what the book is about, I think. Horse Not Zebra. When med students are learning how to diagnose symptoms, they're told, think horse, not zebra, the common, not the exotic, which is good advice even if you're not a doctor. Like when your phone rings at 3 in the morning, think wrong number, not who died. Or if your love is over an hour late for dinner and hasn't called to explain, think gridlock, not head on, dead zone, not dead. When the guy in the truck doesn't slow down, much less stop when you step into the crosswalk, think distracted, not son of a bitch. Recall the time your mind was still at work, how shocked you were to see in your rearview mirror a woman in the crosswalk flipping you off with both hands. And if you're steaming in a mile-long backup because protesters have blocked the bridge again, don't think Where are the damn cops when you need them? Think how, when popping sounds wake you at night, you think firecrackers, not gunshots. So the poems in this book are horses, not zebras. They focus on common things, daily routine sorts of things: walking the dog, hiking in the woods, gardening, riding buses. I don't ride buses that much, but I have ridden buses in the past, so that's good. The tension in the poems comes from the this, not that part of the equation. Thinking one thing and then finding out something else is true. And that's sort of how life is to me, you know, that it's a constant process of sort of figuring out, thinking one thing, finding out something else is true. And that's kind of how these poems operate. I'm going to start with Clearing the Air, which is the first book in the poem, first poem in the book. And I think it's a pretty good example of this, what I've called recalibrating poems. I call them that, sort of based on our GPS system, which when it's giving me directions, if I don't take the turn it tells me to, it immediately says recalibrating. And it's pretty snooty about it. You know, it's like recalibrating, dummy. So these are recalibrating poems. They're sort of constantly sort of shifting from one thing to another. Clearing the Air. He's drifting out of the woods, head bowed, right arm raised and waving slowly, the way someone in church reaches God. About my age, he's dressed as I am, cargo shorts, t-shirt, low-rise hikers, a version of me approaching me. And I'm touched to witness his communion, the summer foliage, an eternity of tunnels and arches, the sun-mottled trails scrolling through trees like illuminated script. As we near each other, he smiles a little sheepishly, lowers his arm, and says, "Don't worry, I've cleared the air for you." And now I see he wasn't praying, but shielding his face from webs. On his sleeve, an orb weaver scrambles toward his neck. I don't tell him. I feel wronged somehow. Not that I care about the webs or spiders. They'll be back tomorrow. But floating from the woods that way, head down, arm up, I wanted a seeker returning from wandering, answer in hand. Then a branch snapped me back to me in the woods with the dog, as I am every morning, thinking to-dos, minding the poison ivy, urging the dog to his business. No epiphany in sight, no holy whispers in the canopy, yet I keep yearning for them. And already I'm envisioning tonight, spiders stringing the trees, not with sticky traps, but with an array of harp-like instruments, tuned by wind and by dew. If you do any gardening, or even kind of routine yard work, you know what it's like in the spring, how exciting it is to get plants and put them in the ground and feel that surge of energy. But by August, everything is exhausted. The plants are exhausted, you're exhausted. Watering doesn't seem to help. I usually just go out one day and tell the plants, good luck, you're on your own. And I'll see you when the weather gets cooler. And that's kind of where this poem starts at that stage of gardening. The poem is called Baton. Even the bluebird fades to gray as summer burns out. The hawk's fearless screech sounds more like grief exhausting itself. I spend the afternoon deadheading daylilies until my fingers numb, my back and knees petrified. I remind myself that new blossoms will blaze the path tomorrow, and the stressed sugar maples I planted in spring are tipped with new growth. I lift a handful of mulch to my nose, breathe the trees inside. And here comes the old couple climbing the steep street. He's frail and stooped, but setting a steady pace, one arm reaching back, hand open, as if waiting for a baton to be placed in his palm by the woman following him. She's taller and stronger looking, her beacon red hair piled so high, I think at first it's a hat. Arm outstretched, she slips her hand smoothly into his and seems to glide to his side. As they pass me, they wave as if they are the liberators of Barnard Avenue. On the man's red sweatshirt is a silk-screened face that looks familiar, but I can't place it until I see the single word above the flowing black hair and dashing beret, Che. No last name needed. I think the sweatshirt must be as old as the man himself. Throwback on top of throwback, embers of revolutionary fire. But then I realize it's new, unfaded, still a little stiff. And the look on his face isn't wistfulness or irony. It's devotion to a future he won't see any more than I will see the struggling maples grow tall enough to shade the house in summer. How can I not raise my mulch-encrusted fist in salute? My flagging will surging like a relay runner, reaching out to hand off the baton. Well, on the subject of handing off batons, we have a new member of our family, Lowell Sinclair Cartwright Nelson, a big name for a baby that turned 1 on New Year's Day. And it's been great in this past year to see him sort of develop and become his own person. He already has his own personality. But in the beginning, I was amused by everyone, including me, trying to determine who he looked like. And this poem is called The Creature. Barely a month old, and already everyone wants a piece of him. Uncle Ed says, "Those eyes are mine." Aunt Nancy can't stop holding his hands because they're her mother's exactly. Beth sees his chin every time she looks in the mirror. Grandparents on one side say it's the family nose. The other grands pull back their hair to show how their ears match his. That mouth belongs to Robin, distant cousin on nobody's side. Mom and Dad glance at each other. A well-meaning friend chimes in. "He's a perfect blend. I don't see either of you in him." Get used to it, kid. Everybody wants something from you, and they'll swear they're giving you a gift. You were born knowing how to cry, just like the rest of us. Learning to laugh is work. When you do, it's all yours. May it be loud, generous, and frequent. The thing about, excuse me a second. the thing about having a new member of the family is that it inevitably leads you to thinking about the members of the family who are no longer there, who passed away. And one of those people is my mother, someone who had a great and memorable laugh and also a pretty good sense of humor. The poem is called Scouts. Those who are gone from us, I hate calling them the dead. It makes them seem so serious, if not symbolic, so heavy with the knowledge they carry. Let's not forget that those who left were lighthearted and surprising. My mother at the dinner table, pulling a derringer from a hidden pocket and shooting her grandson in the forehead with a single sharp bullet of water. This after a day of the boy sneaking up on aunts and cousins and drenching them in rapid fire super soaker. He was pleased with his mischief, but not as pleased as the family when Granny meted out justice. The boy, she said, had been a horse's rosette, her vivid euphemism for asshole. This morning, I woke early in the dark with a terrible ache to talk to her again. 30 years since she went to her great reward, a term she favored for its irony, since she believed that the reward is a choice between going up in smoke or lying deep in the dirt, both of which sounded better to her than pearly gates and eternal perfect boredom. I don't know why I wanted so badly to hear her strong voice, her robust laughter, or why it was suddenly important to ask her about the origin of horse's rosette, since I've never heard anyone but her and all of her descendants, including me, brandish it like a coat of arms. Of course, she didn't tell me, but I heard her voice, heard her say, "Scouts, call us scouts." And it made sense. The ones who go ahead to make sure the trail is clear, the water safe. The ones who leave signals for the rest, a white ribbon tied to a cactus, an arrow painted on a boulder in beet juice, a secret word carved into a tree. When I ask her if she left signs for me, her laughter ricochets in my head like a bullet echoing across a canyon. I always know when my next door neighbor is getting ready to go to work. He works for a landscaping company. He stands on his porch and whams his boots together to get all the dried muck off from the day before. Although most of the time I'm already awake, I always think of it as my alarm, my morning wake-up call. This poem is called My Alarm. My alarm is not my neighbor's boots, though he stands on his porch every dawn and slams them together repeatedly, dry muck flying like dark sparks. Sometimes it sounds like the woodpecker that beats its head against my house. Sometimes a drumstick rapping a snare's rim. Sometimes a gavel demanding order. He pulls on the boots, double knots the laces, and drives off to his landscaping job. Sure, there's days I pillow my ears, but the sound of his two boots clapping is reassuring, a sturdy, reliable answer to the news raging from the radio, relentless as gunfire and wildfire. No, my alarm began long before my neighbor, Today, it's 23 species declared extinct. Yesterday, record murders and evidence that summers burn hotter and longer than ever, spring and fall collapsing into one long winter. Every day, I walk past a fake gravestone some gorilla installed on the greenway, RIP hand-lettered across the top. And underneath, we don't deserve paradise anymore. I think of my neighbor at his work, planting trees, making paths, amending and mulching. At the end of the day, the last bed made, he's back on his porch, sweat-stained and beat, pushing the muddy boots off, leaving them at the door, heels up, to harden by morning. This is going to be my last poem, and it's kind of funny that in a book called Horse Not Zebra, there's no horses and no zebras, unless you count the horse's rosette. But otherwise, no, none of either one of those animals. There are, however, quite a few poems about bears, and it may seem that bears are not a kind of common subject, sort of the stuff of everyday routine. But that's one of the things I love about living in Asheville, is that a lot of bears live here too. And they're pretty good neighbors. And it's pretty common to walk outside of your house and see one, walking around the neighborhood, looking for something to eat, usually going after trash cans or bird feeders. So in that way, it is ordinary and commonplace, but it's something that never gets old. It's always exciting. And weirdly, it brings people together. Parade. When the ice cream truck drives up the street, tootling its happy song, the neighbors come out, get their flavor, and quickly disappear. But when a black bear saunters up the street, the parade begins, the bear leading, drifting from one shoulder to the other, checking trash cans for smells that need investigation. The crowd follows, phones in hand, taking stills and videos, swapping bear stories, laughing, parents telling kids to stay away from the guy riding his bike in figure eights. The line stopping short when the bear glances back, regards its followers with a blend of curiosity and disdain, then goes forward, ignoring the dogs losing their minds behind fences, ignoring the cars driving toward it. The cars pull over, and sometimes the occupants join the crowd. Eventually, the bear glides off the street, down a slope, behind a house, and vanishes. The new family rushes from their backyard and exclaiming, "It walked right past us," as they sat on their deck having wine and hummus. They thought the bear was going to take the bowl. Then the parade ends reluctantly. Everyone meanders back to their houses, their dinners, and their ice cream sandwiches. Well, that's for me. Horse Not Zebra is the book. It's coming out, I think, in April, unless some recalibrating goes on. And I thank you all for listening to me. And I'm now going to say something I've always wanted to say. Andrew, back to you.
And here I am. Eric, thank you so much. That scene of the bears, you see that a lot with the tourists and unfortunately the locals. So that's a pretty vivid scene in Asheville. But can you hang out? We're going to have a few questions at the end, a Q&A session. Can you hang out for a few minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, great. We'll see you in a little bit. So before I introduce our next reader, I wanted to give just kind of a plug for the February 10th reading. We have a guest curator. Jacinta White is going to be our guest curator and host for that evening. And readers she has lined up are Tyree Day, Cedric Tillman, and Fred Joyner. So it should be a great reading. So I'm going to introduce now our next reader. One of the foremost practitioners in English of Japanese poetic forms and the first African-American president of the Haiku Society of America, Lenard D. Moore, has been published in more than 16 countries and translated into more than 12 languages. And I know he has some fans already on because they've let us know. Lenard is the executive chairman of the North Carolina Haiku Society, founder and executive director of the Carolina African American Writers Collective, and co-founder of Washington Street Writers Group. He has won the Sam Ragan Fine Arts Award for his contribution to the fine arts of North Carolina, and his latest collection, Long Rain, from Wet Cement Press, is an exquisite collection of 5-line poems, tanka, and short prose, haibun, organized around the elements earth, wind, fire, and water. And I've been reading Long Rain and really enjoying it, and also a big fan of Lenard's Geography of Jazz. So those are two collections you should definitely check out. With that, I'd like to bring to the stage Lenard Moore. Lenard, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you well.
Okay.
Wow. Can you see me?
I can see you. We've got kind of an upward angle at you, which is fine. But if you want to adjust the camera, you can do that, whatever is comfortable for you.
Let's see. I'm trying to get it right.
Okay. There we go.
Okay.
And I'll drop off Lenard. Look forward to your reading.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Wonderful introduction. It's interesting that you mentioned both of those books. Those are the two books I have here waiting. And so I want to open with Long Rain. You already mentioned about how the book is laid out, so I want to open by reading a haibun, and I'm sure you will know why I'm reading this particular one. It is January. It is also Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday coming up in just about 4 days, so I'm going to read this haibun. I don't think it needs any introduction. Watery Tuesday, April 9th, 1968. I remember that 9th day, a learning day. We're lining up at the classroom door, not knowing what to expect, but obeying our 4th grade teacher. We love our teacher. She's the only white teacher at our school. If we get out of line, she'll say, "Bend over and grab your ankles." We don't want to feel the smack of her tan plastic baseball bat. We love to sing the songs in Spanish and dance in her class. Today we walk single file, the straightest line, to the cafeteria where the glossy wooden stage wakes like the black and white TV. We watch Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. We weep salt water, keep sobbing until we return to class. Spring daylight, a pot or pan bangs behind us. And so I want to read this tanka. I'm going to read some tanka from here and switch back to some haibun and back to tanka. Surging water seeps through the tall wall of sandbags, white body of light, golden rod on the hillside, tossing in shifty wind. Long rain, a hawk settling in the dead oak. How the umbrella trembles in my bony hand. The dog laps its face in the tub of last night's rain, patch of full sunlight, golden like the maples in the backyard. In the owl's claws. After leaving the D.H. Hill Library at North Carolina State University, I noticed the evening deepening all around me. A hint of orange flickers in the colossal trees along both sides of Hillsborough Street. Rainwater dries on the asphalt. Not a single shadow stares. With hands gripping the steering wheel, I drive toward home, looking skyward. Jazz slips out of the radio. I watch the traffic light. No one else is in the car with me as I continue homeward, ready to settle into my house for the rest of this evening. I am getting hungry. I begin dreaming of hot baked sweet potatoes, barbecued chicken, buttermilk biscuits, okra, and macaroni and cheese. Suddenly I glimpse something gray moving in the sky. Momentarily, the riffs of a saxophone on my car radio seem to turn to silence. Coolness settles all around me. My eyes follow the enormous gray wings, punctuating the slowly darkening sky, studying its calmness while being absorbed in its own moment. Moon on yellow aspens, an owl flies beyond my windshield. Witnessing a small bird in the owl's claws makes me feel a sadness for all living things. It is the uncertainty of how we will depart from the earth. A few clouds creep across the face of the moon. It seems as if that owl wanted me to see him. It is the way he swooped on the currents of Carolina air. Bonded by the natural world, I am one with this moment. Late night, remembering the claws of the owl. Open Venetian blinds, moonlight strikes the bird's book. I believe this poem also goes along with this month being January, and usually on New Year's Day we have black eyed peas and collard. So here's a tanka. Black eyed peas and rice steaming on the chipped blue plate. A spear of sunlight raking across the iron pot beside the vase of mums. Alone in the park, suddenly leaf after leaf falling on the lovers, near a gray granite stone, the starry night. I think maybe this will be the, no, I don't want to end with a blues. Maybe one more after this one. The fireplace crackles in the darkening mirror. First smell of gumbo, rhythm of blues tugging at me while I sit on my couch alone. Now, I want to end with this since a snowstorm or ice storm or something is forecast to come our way in about 3 days. bright snow. A four-wheel drive grinds up the hill. I slip and slide on my way back home. Long rain. Okay, I'm going to switch to the geography of jazz. Swinging cool. The bassist hugs, the bass plunks it. Ting, boom, ting, boom. The drummer beats and booms. Saxophonist weaves notes, oscillates, blows, and the pianist finger dances on the keys, swinging at the haven. Musicians spark the sheet music stands and angled microphones, blue backdrop modulating that tempo. They work the tune, drumsticks knocking time, piano plucking our ears, bassman still hugging the bass, straight sets, walls thrumming, steady as the spring moon, inciting the indigo sky. Raleigh Jazz Festival. On the Fayetteville Street Mall, a lean man bobs his head. His sax shines polished copper in a sunbeam. Rhythm, a splendid rising, echoing against concrete. The trumpet 30 inches across the homemade platform. His angled jaw swerves and slacks. His notes perfect geometry for dancing. People snap their fingers. They are baseline vibrating autumn. Pigeons peck peanuts, drum beats on the sidewalk. The magicians blast into sky. Ripple red leaves loose from a stand of trees. Glow in the sunset. Play vamps as earthlings will do. Girl Tap Dancing for Cynthia M. Gary. This poem was inspired by Cynthia Gary. Around 1995, I think she was a senior at Shaw University, and so I was at a program that night where she was in a part of the program tap dancing. The event was held in SD Hall. So here's the poem. Girl Tap Dancing for Cynthia M. Gary. She taps, pats, clicks, shoes dazzling the checkered floor, arms whirl, whirl, legs cross, uncross, notes of the feet rise off towel, shoot toward the ceiling. She pats, clicks, taps, rifling the floor with her shoes, arms defy gravity, legs sizzle perfectly, feet notes soar over the floor, scatter from table to table. She clicks, pats, taps, shoes shocking the floor, arms swirl, whirl, legs stamp, swing, feet note, smoke, beat the floor, the floor. Hudson Valley Writers Center. A man pushes a blue baby carriage. The sound of the river laps the shore. Afternoon crickets chit chat the wind. Dock boats bob. A chipmunk descends the concrete steps to the train stop where Metro North comes and goes. A bird ascends autumn. 3 musicians unpack the black van back to the shellacked door where we will converge on an evening of poetry and music, moods and movements. I think I'll read one more. I don't want to read too many. Hopefully, I give you the appetizer and you'll go out and buy the buffet, both books, I hope. Here we go. Sunday evening for Ramsey Lewis. This poem, too, I heard Ramsey Lewis play at Enlow High School back in 1989. His 2-hour performance was all instrumental. So I just sat there and wrote. So here's the poem. Sunday evening for Ramsey Lewis. As lights glow red in the distant background, he sits at the great black grand, fingers flutter across the keys. 2 black men pluck their guitars' tight gold strings, and the percussionists tings the cymbals, their heads bob, the audience claps. Band members pat their shiny black shoes. The silver gold instruments gleam brighter than the spotlight beaming down on the glossy stage. The piano's chords in tune, better than, oh yes, than any heart stump. Genius's eyeglasses follow his fingers every moment. Ah, the harmony. Now genius, tall and lean, stands, bows, then thumps onto the seat and jazzifies the piano. Man, his pants, the color of the piano, sway as if the wind beats them. No one in the audience sits without bobbing their heads as the music progresses, while the band's shadow heads rock on the curtains, then purple, then red, turning purple, then red. Everyone walks off stage except the drummer who does his thing, drumming until the others come back, playing again. That harmony peels the walls bare. Oh, I love it, love it. Can you hear it too, my friends? They jamming. Every now and then the audience erupts. The tilted man makes that bass talk that talk. My feet tap against the tile floor. Everybody's fingers pop, snap, pop, popping into the chill night. Listen, let these words throb in your head until you let go of your rocking, clapping self. Thank you.
Lenard, thank you so much. It's such an experience to hear you read, and you talk about the musicians making the crowd snap their fingers. I think we're all doing that listening to you read. So really enjoyed that. Can you stick around for some questions at the end after the reading?
Absolutely.
Okay, it would be great to have you join us for that. So I want to bring to the stage our final reader, Kelli Allen. So Kelli's work has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies in the U.S. and internationally. She's the co-founding editor of Book of Matches Literary Journal. She's an award-winning poet, editor, and dancer. She is the recipient of the 2018 Magpie Award for Poetry. Her chapbook, Some Animals, won the 2016 Etchings Press Prize. Her chapbook, How We Disappear, won the 2016 Damfino Press Award. Her collections include Otherwise, Soft White Ash, Imagine Not Drowning from CNR Press, Banjos Inside Coyote, also from CNR Press, and her latest book is Leaving the Skin on the Bear from CNR Press, forthcoming in 2022. Hopefully she'll tell us a little bit about that. She currently teaches writing and literature in North Carolina. With that, I'd like to bring to the stage Miss Kelli Allen. Hey, Kelli.
Hi. Wow, I'm trying to sit still after that. I don't know. I think I have been clapping and Snapping more than I have in years. So thank you, Leonard, for all of that music and bringing history and bringing music like that right back into the present. That was amazing. And Eric, I absolutely loved all of the extraordinary things that you brought into the ordinary world. The spiders and the underlying mythic of the seeker and what was going on in those woods. So completely wildly different poets, but what a sweet thing it is to be here on this incredibly cold night and being fed so much. So I'm going to read a little selection, I think, from all three of the latest books. So the new one coming out later this year, Leaving the Skin on the Bear, and Imagine Not Drowning, and Banjos Inside Coyote. So I have chosen poems that are going to bring us back down into the dirty world and into the earth and into the body and into grief and into death and into longing. So I hope you are snuggled up and have something warm to drink. I'm going to do a narrative piece and then some shorter poems that will progressively get a little lighter and a little happier and a little more focused on sexy time. So I'm going to jump right in. So the first poem is from the new collection. It's called These Things into the Fire. There is a watermelon seed's width left of lunar light. Her wedding ring, the history of my body's worry, a salamander pale pillow, one at a time. Each leaves my hand and meets a swift disappearance in heat. The 12-year-old girl behind my ribs, her boat responsible for drowning the jury, has trouble letting her mother's records and rings fall. This ring is a corral for horses that will never be tame, those chewing their front hooves in frustration to escape. We come back to the field, each of us, on our own. My mother led the way toward pits lined with mouths. Plastic cracks, lobes lighting all at once, an explosion of healthy tissue, again, veins. And now, this ring in my lap, her scans forming a crown cast in relief above my head, and jackrabbit teeth stained with her liver's yellow. The brain is still purple. A mother's dime store basement with too many shelves. We have agreed to so many mailmen dropping envelopes as our measure against this knowing. Collecting one means knocking the whole lot under the desk or, better yet, under the hearth that my father never built but promised anyway to keep. I have decided it is all right to cry out. When the next pharmacist calls, I pretend to be sleepwalking with 4 teaspoons tucked under each arm. Disgrace is the towel I toss atop every mirror. Silver koi swimming further away from more tests, from deciding who stays awake on the hospital cot tonight. In this world, my mother's name is Beneath Dark Water. What else could I say that would be true? We draw from the blue tubing of a single respirator. And my father, he sketches a mile around his boyhood pond, and I stir ink into tomato skins peeled for a week's meals, and this is not enough. My daughter opens a nest between her fingers. She forgives me, and so I linger, and neither of us will become crickets left to their singing. Did you know there are steps from some hospitals' roofs right into English gardens? Corridors too narrow for the processional I would announce to this girl, my daughter, watching me pack away all evidence for some other prosecution. So after my parents both died in the way that they died, which was incredibly unpleasant, deciding to end their own time on this planet, I have focused a lot in my writing on what it means to carry this body. And my favorite teacher, who we also just lost recently, Robert Bly, said that the body carries us for nothing. It carries us for nothing. And I've really been thinking about that and how I've woven that idea through my own work over these years, and it's still present. So we're going to focus a little bit more on what the body does if it doesn't get to metabolize that grief, how that body doesn't move like it should. So this poem is called Between Our Bodies. We know someone large is behind us when we reach our first chubby hand up toward the sweet thing we desire to bring into our mouths, to feel Eskimo round, unthreatened, if just for that instant past chewing. You see, size means age to the very young. Terrible fear comes later. Being afraid happens when the rational ego steals the pudding we have set aside for some luminous aunt, a sister to a mother who slapped our fat wrists one too many times. You see, this flesh we carry is the same, from the purple umbilicus to the pubic blossom to the thin knees surviving an Appalachian trail walked a month too long. Sitting in the bus, the despicable greed of the child you were stretches an arm deep into your throat, wraps around that heron white neck, and chokes you instantly back to sleep. Now we'll go a little bit into sexy time and what early sexy time means to a body that isn't quite ready to take it as something worthy of praise, to take it as something worthy of holiness. So this poem is called A Thief, a Nakedness, a Boat Far from Shore. My legs are apart, twin otters sharing a single stone between them. No longer on the windowsill of my mother's womb, this body is not her body. The minnows we vomit, we swallow right back down. These slithering selves too much underwater. Once upon a time, everything ends. The village, the woodcutting, the orphans' hunger, and their fullness too. And one very much for Robert Bly and the old Gnostics who have taught me so much. Smoke, fire, wind, mud, darkness, and old liars. Baking dark bread is only a crime when the old firemen are left hungry. Ants will carry crumbs if it rains or not. Has anyone asked you whose diving ball you were chained to? Maybe it's good to be covered in this much water. Your hands are never as empty as your stomach. Just imagine what is carried and where to. That reckless girl begging for fruit should not distract you. Pity? Pity is an endless bed stretching down into the whale's thick gut, her teeth pearls caught in the plowed fields. Have you conquered that growling yet? What can a convicted farmer do but pull his mule along? Even stag beetles would catch their pewter feet in stirrups and tumble off the path at just the mention of your wild, wild hair. All right. Couple more real body poems, and then I'll end on something a little softer. Not the first time to enter tonight. Passwords to enter the wash house are tattooed small across our elders' asses, and we have to bend waists extra low to catch the fading glimpse humping along from Sulphur Springs to nickel-plated knockers guarding the squat door. But this is just a story you sell when you want me on my stomach, pressed full-bodied and bellied into the cotton springs. These are the tales cast on lines thrown far into a past you well know I can't resist. So I instead open wider, pillow a pyramid my hips mount. And they say the youngest Greek horseman knew best how to ease a nervous mare onto one long boat by walking her backward, rump a bouquet of sweaty curling hair, her flanks already soaked through want and water. So I've been in North Carolina not quite 2 years. Moved here in August of 2020 after fleeing the magical land of China, South Korea, and Thailand, and have landed in what is quickly becoming one of my favorite places on the planet. And what I've noticed about being in the Carolinas is everything is slower. Everything is slower. People take their time, and they take their time with a kind of pride that I have never seen anywhere else. So this poem is something for that pride and also a little bit of a warning against it. Wanting what's owed. In the Carolinas, no one seems concerned that 2 years just as equally equal 20. Grouper turn their flat pupils to the same setting sun from birth to death. People might manage their anxiousness better if they held their own crab boxes closer to the switch where mangrove roots stand. Why is it that we touch the same bark over and over and still don't notice the small ants protruding down into the moss? Perhaps our knuckles have become careless again, and even Elijah leaves the table early after one glance at those swollen joints. Yesterday, the fisherman I met agreed to stop crying over the rib bones untouched in his shallows. This far south, the sea lions are no longer milky white. And everywhere, what's awake gave up praising decades ago. I'm going to end on a poem about home. This is the title poem from the collection Imagine Not Drowning. So I'll leave you with something a little more hopeful. Still trying to figure out what home means, but I'm getting a little closer. Imagine not drowning. Spiked-edged milkweed, and one morning soon, the ankle scrapes won't matter, and you will keep walking, pin dots bloodying up your bones and your shoes right on past what was a minefield, bulbs in orbit, neat circles and rows planted together. None of this means you are less a dragon. None of this means you are less a waltzing wingman on fire. Sometimes the leaving is not falling. It's like this. Let's say you have discovered the feathered starfish, unexpectedly waiting in its tidal pool, and you turn to say, "Look," and notice again your aloneness. The heat escapes your skin, and still you are fine. We sew up the lies we keep inward, threads, colors as insignificant now as before. So, hurl the body up into the rain, head bent back, throat to the clouds. You will escape, you will climb, and the crash you hear against those rocks is not meant for confessions or going back. Kiss your own fingers. You have carried yourself home. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for having me. And thank you so much, Eric and Leonard, for sharing your words tonight. I certainly feel warmer and certainly feel fed.
Kelli, thank you so much. I love that. Sometimes the leaving is not falling. What an elegant line. So we really enjoyed your reading. I'm going to bring all of our poets back for a Q&A session. I'll kick us off with a question for Eric. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about assembling the poems for Horse Not Zebra and how it differs from maybe some of your previous work?
That's a good one. A good question. The assembling of Horse Not Zebra, it was really not very intentional until the very end, when I knew that I had enough poems for a manuscript, and then started looking to see what sort of connections the poems were making with each other and how that might sort of shape a unified book. And then, just started putting the poems together and seeing how they kind of cross-talked with each other, and that was it. And how they are different. Well, I like to think that they're kind of richer, and that there's more going on in them than in earlier poems. I've always written about sort of ordinary events and experiences, but I think these poems are a little more complex than the ones that came before.
Okay. Lenard, I had a question for you. I was curious if you could tell us about what attracts you to the Japanese form poetry, and maybe if you were talking to like a young poet, or I should say probably a new poet, why should they attempt these forms? What can they gain from doing that?
Well, one thing, I think it helps the longer forms of writing, the precision of imagery, the conciseness of language, especially, so we wouldn't be too wordy. And also being attuned to the natural world. Think about the transcendentalists, Emerson, Thoreau, all of those cats, and, who were out in the woods and so forth, and documenting, recording. And I think that's what haiku does, documents, and freezes a moment in time.
Kelli, we've got a question for you. How has editing a journal changed or reinforced how you look at and revise your own poetry?
Hi, Becky. That's a great question. So I've been doing journal editing for a really long time, but I was so excited to get to, with Nicholas Christian, create Book of Matches. And that has been such a special project and changed a great deal of how I look at what is being said the most frequently. What are the biggest calls to action in poetry and in short fiction and in translation? I have enjoyed seeing what matters most now to the poets writing now. That's what happens when you get to read submissions. You get to start to see trends that come through in their language, in the way that they're using their language. And there's so much urgency that I haven't seen in American poetry, at least since the late 90s, just urgency. So it's changed my own sense of picking up the pace, that I want to bring more of my history. And as Leonard pointed out, the old cats and my background with philosophy, I want to bring Hume back into the poems. There's always room for Kierkegaard too. So yeah. It's changed a lot, Becky. It's a whole lot.
So a question, we'll just go around to each of you on this one. Question from Stefan. Do you write daily, and do you engage in other art forms? Eric, do you want to take that one?
I'd like to say I write daily. I write almost daily. I don't write a poem a day, but I have a journal that I keep, and I write in it most days. And sometimes those things aren't much more than just observations, but sometimes they start to evolve into poems. So I do write pretty frequently, and I think it's important for me anyway to sort of keep at it.
Lenard, how about you? What is your routine, and do you engage in other art forms? I hear a lot of music in your work. Are you a musician as well, or?
Well, I perform with jazz musicians, and I write jazz poetry. But I've been performing with musicians for over 2 decades, for a long time. And sometimes while they're rehearsing, I write. and then we go and perform it. So I've been doing that along. Music is really important to me. I try to do the same thing with my haiku and tanka. And I'm going to tell you something, because I don't know when I'll see you, so I'm going to let you know. Kelly, I wrote 2 haiku while you were reading.
Oh, nice.
And one of them is dedicated to you.
Ooh.
Do you want to share it?
Okay,
Yeah,
I share both of them. And so I call this one something, I call it Praise Coup. I don't usually give them a title, but I thought this would work well, so that's what I call it. And the poem is Ice Storm Forecast. Blue gems of her necklace sparkles as she reads, for Kelli Allen. I mean, that necklace was so appealing. I just kept looking at it. I'm like, wow,
that's
that's really nice. I don't know if I can tell her, but I'm going to write this. And so this is the other one. Because I noticed when you were reading, and they're really sculpted and neat, the way you have your eyebrows done. So I noticed how they moved up and down when you were reading. I had never noticed that before. So here's the poem. See, that's what haiku does. It puts you in tone of everything. Online reading, arches of our eyebrows, rise and fall.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah.
So I think we have the answer to whether Leonard reads or writes every day. I think we have our answer there. Kelly, do you write every day, and do you engage in other art forms? I know you shared with us that you're a dancer.
Yeah,
tell us
and apparently I blush more often than I thought I did. So thank you, Leonard.
Yeah,
Music is super important to me too. I've been involved with music my whole life, and I was a dancer for a very long time. I haven't been in the studio since COVID hit. I hope to get back into some sort of studio and at least do some choreography when that becomes available. But yeah, I also write every day. I don't unfortunately get to write poetry every day. A lot of it's academic writing, but yeah, I try to write every single day. And I wish I could play instruments better. And I wish I could sing in front of more people. And in one of my lives, I'm a Broadway star.
Got another question from Sweet. Great name. Eric, let you answer first. How has your approach to poetry changed over time? Have you transitioned from saying something to saying something? So maybe looking for a greater depth in your work?
Yeah, I think sort of the earlier question, I was kind of getting to this point of, I think my poetry has just grown more complex over time, and doesn't settle for easy answers. I don't mind if my poems don't resolve themselves in a tidy package, and I think I used to want poems to do that. And well, yeah, I'd like to think that I was trying to say a capital something all along, but I do think because my poems have gotten richer and more complex, that the something has gone from lowercase to uppercase. So, yeah.
Leonard, how about you? How has your approach to poetry changed over time?
Oh yeah, when you're starting out, you're anxious to get the work out there, send it out, publish, and all that stuff. I don't know if you're really into revisions, but then the more you write, the longer you do it. You don't send anything out. You want to get it right. You work on it and work on it for months or even years. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And the other thing probably is like Eric said, I don't want to use the word complex, but you try to texturize your poetry more, and hopefully be able to, I don't know, give some insight to the reader about the world in which we live.
Yeah. We're not hearing you, Andrew.
I cautioned you all about muting yourself, and then I did it. Yeah, I definitely hear that in your work, Leonard. And Kelly, I was going to ask you, how has your approach changed over time?
I can definitely second what both Leonard and Eric have said, that I hoped from the beginning that the work has been capital S something, has lurched toward capital T truth, and what small ways that I can do that. But I think the biggest thing that's changed is I'm so worried about our collective forgetfulness, our societal forgetfulness. The more we rely on technology, yes, I'm happy we're here and we have this technology, but the more we rely on that and the quicker access to fast food information and fast food literature, and we stop paying attention as much to the teachers that came before us, I worry we're going to forget. So my work has taken a lot, and I'm grateful from the old teachers, and I'm hoping to bring some of their voices back up. And some of the old images and the deep image poets, I don't want that to disappear as we become so self-consumed and worrying about tribalism and worrying about politics. We're political no matter what we do, but we can also focus on beauty and focus on the strength of the body and the strength of language. So I'm hoping it's becoming more grounded in something older.
Yeah, good.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions. I want to thank each of you just for phenomenal readings. I really appreciate you taking the time with us. I've dropped links to all of your work in the comments section, and I'll just close us out. But guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew, for having us.
Thank you.
Kelli and Eric, it's great reading with you.
You too.
Yeah, likewise. I really
so
enjoyed
savage.
it. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye, everybody.
Absolutely. We had sexy time.
Bye-bye.
We had
Ciao.
bears. It's great. Thank you, guys. So I want to thank you all for attending this reading of Carolina Poets Goes Live. We're here the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. We feature both established poets and emerging voices. I want to thank each of our readers for participating tonight, and for you for watching. Again, I've dropped the links to each of the poets' work in the comments. Please buy the art that moves you. And thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next month, or at the end of this month, and again in February.